So happy Halloween, everybody, and happy fourth meeting. Is this our fourth?
Fifth.
This is our fifth. Happy fifth, maybe not last, but happy fifth meeting for our basic needs budget task force. It is Halloween. It is the 31st of October. Wow. Can't believe we're already at our fifth meeting, 2023. And we're going to finish up our work on what we're going to recommend for changes to the basic needs budget calculation and the livable wage calculation. So we are, anyway, we are now all assembled. We had some fairly icy conditions and slow arrivals. So we are now all together. We're missing Aaron, but I think the rest of us are all here. So happy Halloween. And with happy Halloween, I'm going to take off my happy Halloween hairdo. And the real me will show up here. So Patrick, why don't you begin, and we'll go through the draft report, which is posted and which we all have. And we are going to identify the decision points we still need to make, because we have a couple. And so let's start.
Great. So Patrick Titterton, Joint Fiscal Office. I think my plan for right now is we'll just walk through the report, and we can either wait till the end to circle back on decision points, or we can just stop and talk about them as we go. But I guess the first question would be, I don't have slides prepared. We're just going to be looking at the report, which I know you all have. Would you still like me to share that on the screen?
What? The report?
Yeah.
Sean, would that be helpful, or do you have it pulled up? We can't hear you, Sean.
Yeah, I have it pulled up. So either way.
Okay, so why don't we not share screen, because it's nicer to see Sean's face.
Is this being publicized widely?
I have no idea who's online.
Is this,
It's on the website for public consumption.
if it's for public conception and there's somebody that's not a member of the committee that doesn't have the paper draft?
It's on the web.
They can pull it up from the.
They can pull it up from,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. No, that's what I said. It's on the web. They can pull it up and follow.
But for
I think it's-
anybody that's watching us that isn't a member of the committee, they should go to the website.
Yes, absolutely. The draft that we're going to walk through is on the website as a draft,
Yes.
because we still have decision points to make.
Yes.
Okay, so because it would be, just being able to see our committee members, I think it would be better to be able to still see Sean, if it's possible. So it sounds like it is. So let's go for the gusto.
All right, so I have in front of you, or pulled up on your screen, the draft report. It's got 5 primary sections. We have the executive summary, we have the enabling language, we have a review of all the discussions on assumptions and component methodology that you've discussed. And then we have a couple of appendices just with the underlying statute for this report and what you all did over the past 5 meetings.
Well, exactly. And I just want to say at the top, thank you for this first draft. Thank you for doing this. It's a lot of work, I realize. And we are most appreciative. And you did a lovely summary of some of our conversation, which I appreciate. I think we all appreciate it. And explanations as to how we made the decisions we made. So why don't we, I assume you're going to start on the, after post the enabling legislation, because that's fairly straightforward.
Well, executive
wanna start with
summary,
the
actually.
executive summary?
Let's start with the executive summary.
Okay, great.
It's 2 things missing.
Right. Exactly.
So just starting on this first page, and I already have an edit to add to this, which is to add page numbers to the report.
That's true, because you have page numbers in the table of contents and then no page numbers following.
I'm just noticing that now.
That's okay. It helps us follow along.
So Act 54, which was the enabling language for this committee, is in this first section here. Over the course of the 5 meetings, I identified 5 components which, barring any other decision points that we still have to make on one or two things. You're recommending changes for food. You're recommending not necessarily a change, but an acknowledgement for childcare. There's a change for clothing and household expenses, telecommunications, and you are recommending to add the personal care products spending category to the report. You've also made potentially two, maybe more changes to the family configurations, and we'll talk about that today. And you've also made a recommendation on the urban-rural averaging to get the official livable wage, which again, we'll also talk about that. So first up, we have, just to review, this committee was recommended because it had not convened since 2008. And the report was due for sort of a refresh or update. This was recommended by our office in the last basic needs budget report from 2022. And then I also have some sort of more general information in here on, this report built out of that 1999 study, and it's actually written into statute that this report should largely follow the methodology used in that 1999 study, allowing for appropriate updates over time. So that's still sort of the underlying groundwork for this report going forward. And then, so I have here what the official livable wage was in the last report. Again, that was the average between the urban and rural areas. And I'm just stating that the next report that we write will incorporate all methodological changes that you are recommending. The only area where that may be, we will need to address outside of just the recommendations the committee is making are changes that are in statute, right? So for example, the livable wage as the average between urban and rural, that's that's in statute. So that would require a bill to go through the legislature to change that piece of it.
Good. So are you gonna move from executive summary?
If you have a question, feel free.
I was just thinking that it would be helpful to the reader, especially for legislators who are not gonna read the whole document, if at the end, there on the end of the executive summary, if there was a table that actually listed the recommended changes that you reference the very top of the executive summary, so that it just was a really quick reference. So that if people only read the executive summary, they would know what was being changed.
What changes had actually been made and where to find them.
That we were recommending.
Yeah.
And then they go on and they can read the details about the why.
Certainly.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Very nice.
Is there anything else on the executive summary?
I think
No?
I don't have any problem with the components the way they are. I think someplace in there needs to be an opening statement about what we see happening in the world. And I'll give you my example. Housing is driving everything for me within this. It's pushing people in certain communities further out for jobs, which exacerbates travel and all of those components. Some in particularly recreation communities are seeing exorbitant prices after COVID. So you can't get housing for middle class people in certain communities anymore. It's pushing them further out, exacerbating all the other pieces. And then you've got, on top of that, you've got short-term rentals that in communities, and I'll use Stowe as the example, nearly a third of all the homes in Stowe are now short-term rentals, which would have been something that had been more long-term rental. So someplace in the front of this, I think the ground on which stuff is happening is different now than it was 25 years ago when or 20 years ago when we first started this. And I think it's a different backdrop than it is. And I think some opening statement about what we're seeing for changes would be helpful.
I think that's fair. It would be great to have a summary of the number of, I mean, so much has changed. Housing being one of them, since this original report was done. I don't disagree, because I think our discussion about whether to have 1, 2, or 3 categories, independent of the components, not the categories, really, the,
Household configurations?
yeah, whether we did 1 Vermont, whether we did urban, rural, or whether we did 3, that conversation really incorporated a lot of our concerns. And one of the concerns I think that Richie and I share in particular, and I think Elizabeth does in some regard, is that the economic pressures have been pushed into the rural communities in a way that we have not seen before. There really was more of a divide, and now it's more artificial. With living being pushed and commuting being almost a necessity, sadly, I don't see the differential so much between rural and urban. So
Well,
and we're maintaining it, but that
shows up for me in a community like Stowe. You could find an apartment, even if it was with somebody else, in a community like Stowe. Or you could have young families 25 years ago. They're now all, it's mandatory that you have 2 cars and somebody.
agreed. But how do we do that in the summary? I think, because you acknowledge it further in the report, our robust discussion about this. But in some ways, if the summary could reflect, this is something I think we need to track going forward. It is sort of the bleed of urban financial challenges into the rural communities.
Now, the first thing I thought was maybe an opening statement saying, these are the things in the overall we see are changing. And we struggled to come up with the component changes.
So have an opening statement that talks about the differences between from 1999 to today. I think that's probably good. Elizabeth, what are your thoughts?
While we're talking about this, it makes me think that we really should be doing this more often than every 30 years. And maybe that's part of the thing, because this is a drastic change from the last time. And I don't want to wait until, it's a demographic change. And I don't know I really don't know, I'm not a sociologist, how long it takes for demographic change to come about, but maybe we should talk about how often this formula needs to be examined.
Yeah. What do you think, Ms. Ellen?
I totally agree, Representative, Elizabeth, sorry. That we should be doing this more than every 12 or 13 years. It was 2008 when the last time it happened, so absolutely. But I think that's just something that we all need to pay attention to, when the Joint Fiscal Office says, we really want you to get another group together, we should do this, because there was 4 years ago that they last did that, so, it took a couple of years. My one, I just want to sort of throw out though, just to get up an elevation about, this is intended to be a technical review and not a policy document. So I'm a little nervous about adding context beyond what's in the discussion of what we talked about up front, in that it might start to feel a little bit more like policy as opposed to sort of the pure part of the actual methodology. And especially because some of the things like the housing question and the transportation, we actually elected not to make a change in the methodology at all. Right, because we actually felt like the methodology was sound. And I think that what you're offering up is the larger backdrop and the larger context, in essence, makes these wage levels all the more important to actually have employers do? Because the cost of living has in fact gone up so much.
Then why not in the front just have a statement about that and what we've seen? Because it's factual when you easily look at property transfer tax numbers from up and down the spine of the state where the recreation areas are. Costs have been driven so high that it's pushed people further out.
Is there a way to be able to say that, in essence, these figures are actually still very conservative?
I think that would be a great thing to be able to say at the beginning, and I think, but I do think it's helpful to have a frame. You're right, it is technical, but quite honestly, we're making choices that also are policy driven within the technical stuff. I mean, it's not like those are two separate things. One's affected by the other. And I think, I
guess I'm just sort of thinking about, like, when this lands in the committees of jurisdiction and it's reviewed, what do you want people to take from this as sort of the most important points? We want them to agree to any statute changes,
statutory
right?
changes.
We want them to, like, accept this. We want them to see that this, like, we had rigor in our deliberations, and we want the methodological changes to be accepted, and we want this document to be used in policy conversations in various committees, right?
You can't have a policy discussion without understanding what's going on in the overall. And we've, in the last 3 years, I'll say particularly, the world's very different now than it was in 2019. And what I would say is, as they have the discussion about how often should this be done, for me, it says once every 5 years.
Yes.
Might be a good.
I agree with you. I was going to recommend that we add actually a specific number, that every 5 years this should be reviewed.
Right. Well, if I look at just before COVID, the real estate market and what has gone on with housing from 2019 today is hugely different. Hugely different. And it colors everything else I look at in all of this. And when you get to a policy discussion and it deals with money in a budget, am I going to put money towards housing? What type of housing am I going to put in? And do I do that versus other human services programs?
What did we do for us is just stay out there. It should be kind enough to source you to check. Thank you.
Oh, Sean's got a hand up, sorry.
Sean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was just, thinking, I think agreeing a lot of that. I'm thinking it's important to make these these points in the documents in the leading up. But I'm wondering, in the terms of saying it's conservative, if I'm following it right, or understanding kind of with the demographic shift and all the changes we've talked about, Senator Westman making making the points about people when they drive further and further out from either some of the village centers or recreation areas. Is it because we're, on the other hand, we're also using the median and the whatever we can and the averages, which are pulling things up for other folks that aren't in that boat? Are we really seeing, is it not so much that we're being conservative, but that we want to flag that there's greater variance? I'm wondering if variance is the right term, because if there's people who are being pushed out to drive far, they're going to be on the high end of that. If they're in a place where there is higher housing costs, I mean, we have the average cost, we got the 40% FMR in, so there's certainly people that are on the other side of that are paying a lot less, or people that are driving less than the average. It's being pulled up by the people that are driving far. It's getting me just thinking back to the point I made last time. I think we obviously want that one high level number that's going to get all the attention of what the basic needs wage is. But I think to the extent that we can flag that it's very much driven by housing. It's very much driven by transportation, these other components. And to the extent that an employer or another user of this can pull to the link to see what the specific fair market rent is in their county and so forth, and particularly look at a couple of these pieces. We obviously don't want it to detract from that overall basic need budget number, but I think it's a way to flag that there are going to be places that are more acute. And I think to allow and pull on those policies, not getting into the policy side, but teeing it up for the policy discussion, that an employer that located in a village where a person could live and be a 1-car family rather than a 2-car family, or could live and not have, long commute or some of the other pieces.
Sean, I'm just gonna interrupt you because I think the noise level here is so difficult.
Oh, sorry.
Outside of this room, I know Liz and I are having a hard time hearing you. And that was like,
I heard about the first half of it.
yeah, we heard,
All right, I didn't hear the first half, the
right.
second half.
And it's just going up and down in speed. So I think we're gonna go off live and reconvene next door.
It's just as bad in there. I suggest we take a 10-minute break and move up to the 30s.
Okay, great. Ooh, that would be the best. Maybe there's more.
We're gonna go up live.
Okay, great. Yes, we'll be